Let's start off with the survey. And first we'll start off with sort of a brief overview. 2013 was clearly a challenging year for law firms. A lot of people thought 2012 was a little bit of an anomaly because the fourth quarter finished so strong for a lot of firms. If you just look, and I'll remember, this is snapshots, and it's not necessarily indicative of everybody, but if you look at I think there's 13 Pennsylvania-based AmLaw 200 firms. If you look at those firms, in 2012, they were all basically flat or had increases. 2013, 5 of the 13 were down, and some of them were down significantly. Over the last several years, I would say, anecdotally, looking at the AmLaw 200 firms that are based in this state, on average, the growth was usually, I'd say, 1 to 3%, with a couple outliers at 5 to 7, and then everyone was basically flat or maybe only down like, 0.1%. That wasn't the case this year. There were really winners and losers, at least among the AmLaw 200. And based on what we're seeing, that's sort of indicative of what's going on. I think I said last year, we're hearing all these national trends about greater stratification among law firms in America, that the AmLaw 50 are outperforming the rest of the AmLaw 100 and greatly outperforming the AmLaw 200 and smaller firms and niche firms. And up to this point, I've said the data doesn't, and the feedback I've gotten, it's not happening here in Pennsylvania. I would say based on the things I've seen, I've read, I've heard, and based on last year's financial performance of the firms, that is starting to happen here. We're starting to see that sort of separation. And there are all kinds of implications regards to that. So that is sort of an overarching theme, I think, throughout. It's reflected, I think, in the survey. It's reflected in a lot of the bank surveys. And that's the other thing. So there's been a number of banking surveys that have been out lately. Wells Fargo, I think, is coming out with theirs. Citi came out with theirs not too long ago. There's the Thomson Reuters Peer Monitor Index. And there's also one that Eric Press wrote about, the former editor-in-chief of the American Lawyer. It's the Time Metrics. And it's interesting. So most of the surveys, unlike last year, most of the surveys show managing partners are upbeat nationally. Generally, the confidence is up a little bit better. Most of them are reporting that revenue's up, profits are up, their workload's up. What else in terms of stuff? Profits up. But there are some, and then even the work's up, and even things like litigation, which have been lagging, even there's some indications that's increasing. Having said all that, the Time Metrics one that Eric wrote about is not based on a survey of managing partners. It's based on the billing, the actual billing of a number of large corporations that purchase a lot of legal services. And the statistics there were almost a flip. In general, that things weren't up from 2013, that actually demand was down, revenue was down for a lot of firms. But having said all that, what's consistent about all the surveys, and they're all over the little place, what's consistent is who's doing the best? The AmLaw 1 to 50. And they're doing substantially better in terms of revenue, profits, rate increases, exponentially than the smaller firms. Now, in comparison with our managing partner survey, which goes to the PA Law 100, you're talking firms anywhere from over 1,000, more than 1,000 lawyers to firms with what, 28 to 30 lawyers. So there's a great variety in that, and that's going to, keep that in mind. That's one thing, got to keep in mind when you're going through the survey results. But having said that, in general, the survey results show that in terms of looking forward to 2015, managing partners in Pennsylvania are more optimistic than the national. And that's, I think, consistent from year to year that we've seen. Having said all that, too, though, it's still very much a buyer's market. We hear constantly, both from GCs are very adamant about putting pricing pressure, about pushing back on bills, about being more forceful about who they want handling matters. We're hearing a lot about that, and I can reflect on that a little bit later. In talking to managing partners of both large firms and mid-sized and smaller regional firms, I've been asking them, are you optimistic? Yeah, I'm optimistic. Well, what do you think's going to happen? Well, I think, we'll be about flat, maybe up a little bit. And that's, I think, reflective of what a lot of people call the new normal. And that's why, like last year, I said, I said last year I thought most firms, the best they could hope for was about, realistically was about 3 to 4%. Some people would do better than that. I revised that based on all the banking surveys I've done and I've seen and read and all the talks I've had with people and talking to consultants and talking to managing partners. I think it's more likely to be 0 to 5%. And so that's something to think about, just in terms of guideposts for your own firm, in terms of how 2014 finishes out and what the prospects are for 2015. So people are optimistic, but they're optimistic in a different way than they were pre-recession, and I think it's pretty interesting. Another thing that's still very much true, though, is that there's still the push for increased profits, and a lot of firms, how are they making their money? They're making their money by cutting costs. They're still doing it, and I think it's anything from technology to space to staffing and to lawyers. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the survey, and it's not quite as dire as it is in some years with the survey, but that's constantly on the table. And I think for the struggle to grow revenue is a persistent theme from the largest firms to the smallest firms. How do they get there? What are they doing? How are they going to get more revenue? And no one has I'll be the first to tell you that I don't think anyone has the answer. If size alone mattered, the numbers would be a little bit more indicative. You could say, hey, look at the AmLaw 1 to 50, but it doesn't quite all shake out like that. And even among the AmLaw 1, the top 50 largest firms, there's some great disparity between firms of equal size. So it's a real push, for where you're going to get the revenue from, how are you going to get it. And I can tell you from talking to GCs, it's interesting. Most of them, and Gina, correct me if I'm wrong based on some of the stuff you've heard, they tell me consistently, it's not about the firm, it's about the lawyer. And the consistent theme in talking to GCs, and I'll just throw this out to you guys, they talk about having a close relationship with whoever their key partner is that they work with. They express constant frustration with dealing with the bureaucracy and the billing practices of a lot of law firms. I don't know whether you guys hear that or not, but they say it all the time. It drives them nuts. We've done some articles on this. They say cross-selling sucks. They hate cross-selling. They do. And that's how blunt they said it. When I was in a meeting, I was like, what do you guys don't like about law firms? Cross-selling sucks. I ran out, I go to Gene, I go, you got to do an article. Cross-selling sucks.
The headline worked out a little differently.
Well, and then you get them on the phone and they're like, well, this way some firms do. We don't. So it wasn't. I wanted to run a headline that said cross-selling sucks. I might have gotten some pushback from some of my editors, but anyway. But that's some of the feedback we're hearing, in regard to that. But in terms of growing revenue, really it's about the lawyers. A lot of them, I think they're loyal to the lawyer. Although I get the sense, and I don't know if you've seen it, I think in terms of growing revenue, I do think there is some opportunity to get new clients out there. I think some GCs, especially for more commoditized work, are willing to move to another firm. And I think they're willing to think slightly smaller. But there's no guarantees in that. But I do get that sense. I get the sense that they are willing to try. That they're still in the phase now where they're pushing back on price. But they're under, the other constant drumbeat is they're under constant pressure from upper management in their companies, from purchasing and procurement. That's another constant theme is that procurement wanting to make inroads with the GCs in terms of getting involved in the procurement of outside legal services. Also hearing on the persistent theme about a lot of in-house counsel thinking about hiring more and taking more work in-house. So just keep that all in mind, in terms of framing some of these results and in terms about how do we grow revenue.